The United States, having decided to end its support for Ukraine, cannot simply turn off the Ukrainian Air Force's US-designed F-16 fighters. But the Trump administration has cut off vital support for their jamming capabilities, which could deprive the Ukrainian Air Force of a critical air countermeasure. However, as Forbes analyst David Axe writes, the Ukrainians are not powerless and can shift the burden of air jamming onto the French Dassault Mirage 2000 fighters. As Axe points out, the Ukrainian Air Force is taking full advantage of the ability of F-16s equipped with AN/ALQ-131 pods to flood Russian radar screens with electronic noise. They act as flying air defenses with advanced missile warning technology, notes the conflict intelligence team. But the Russian Air Force can circumvent the jamming by reprogramming its radars to different frequencies. As Axe points out, while the Biden Air Force was able to keep up with the Russian adaptation by constantly tweaking the AN/ALQ-131 frequencies under Trump, Ukrainian pilots are not receiving updates and the programs could soon become obsolete. However, France's Mirage 2000s are equipped with their own powerful jammers and the Americans are not involved in their programming, the analyst notes. The Mirage 2000 5F, currently in service with the French Air Force, flies with a combination of the Servile Radar Warning Receiver, Sabre Jammer and Eclair Flare Dispenser. This system was cutting edge in the 1980s, but within a generation it was falling behind. Recognizing this weakness and understanding the seriousness of the Russian missile threat over Ukraine, the French Ministry of Defense promised to install new electronic countermeasures on the Mirage 2000s before handing them over to Ukraine. The ministry probably had in mind the predominantly analog integrated countermeasures Suite Mark II or the all-digital integrated countermeasures Suite Mark III, Axe notes. Either system is an improvement over the older system and a potential replacement for the AN/ALQ-131 as the American pods lag behind the Russian adaptation. The French are firm allies of Ukraine and are willing to reprogram the jammers if necessary. In the longer term, the Ukrainians could refit their F-16s with non-American electronic countermeasures, Axe notes. But that could take time and money that Ukraine cannot afford. In February, French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu announced that Ukraine had received the first Mirage 2000 5F fighters. And on the night of March the 7th, French Mirage fighters took part for the first time in repelling a Russian attack and shot down Russian missiles. A European Air Force of 120 fighter jets could be deployed to protect the skies from Russian attacks on Kiev and western Ukraine without provoking further conflict with Moscow. The Guardian reports, citing a plan drawn up by military experts. Supporters of the project say Europe's Sky Shield would be an airspace defense zone separate from NATO to stop Russian cruise missiles and drones from attacking cities and infrastructure, making it part of the ceasefire in the skies proposed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenski this week. The ceasefire, Union, will cover 3 operating Ukrainian nuclear power plants, the cities of Odessa and Lviv, but not the front line or the east of the country, and, according to a recently published article, could achieve greater military, political and socio-economic influence than 10,000 European ground troops, the publication adds. It is noted that supporters of such a plan include former US Air Force General and NATO Supreme Allied Commander Europe, Philip Breedlove, former British Army General and Deputy Supreme Allied Commander at the beginning of the last decade, Richard Shireff, as well as former Polish President Aleksander Kwasniewski. In addition, another supporter, namely former Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis, noted The implementation of the Sky Shield would be an important component of strengthening Europe, which would effectively and efficiently guarantee Ukraine's security. It is noted that the Sky Shield project was developed by former Royal Air Force planners who previously worked with the Ukrainian army. However, European leaders have expressed no desire to patrol Ukrainian skies while the war is ongoing. The worry in Western policy circles is the risk that NATO fighter jets could find themselves in direct conflict with Russia, which could lead to a dangerous escalation of hostilities if aircraft from either side are attacked or shot down, the Telegraph stressed. At the same time, supporters of the project assure that the risk to the pilots of the Sky Shield is low because since the beginning of 2022, Russia has not dared to fly beyond the existing front line. The developers of the plan say that the actual demarcation with Russian aircraft will be more than 200 kilometers. Ukraine is capable of carrying out more strikes on military targets in Russia, but it needs to increase the corresponding production and have the corresponding intelligence data, said Anatoly Krapchinsky, a manufacturer of electronic warfare equipment and a former Air Force officer, on air at the telethon. According to the expert, if we talk specifically about intelligence data, Ukraine has the appropriate reconnaissance drones that can fly to a depth of up to 1,000 kilometers. The question of mass production of long-range strike drones. There is a question regarding financing. In fact, there are enough companies in Ukraine that develop such weapons which are improving every time. Therefore, there is no problem. The main task is to obtain certain data on where to strike and scale up production, Krapchinsky said. In addition, given the US aid cutoff, Ukraine should obtain a license to produce certain air defense missiles in order to supplement the weapons it has on its balance sheet. The expert noted, the main thing now is to find solutions to counter Russian ballistic missiles. We need to actively communicate with France, which has the first Franco-Italian SAMP/T system, which can be used against ballistic missiles, the expert believes. He admitted that Ukraine has very few such systems, but in 2025, France plans to put about 6 new such systems into service. As media wrote, among the weapons that Ukraine received from the US, the most acute shortage we can feel is the lack of air defense systems, noted People's Deputy Oleksandr Fedyenko, answering the question whether the stockpiles of weapons previously supplied to us by the US will really be exhausted in 2 or 3 months. The parliamentarian noted that this depends on many factors, in particular on the activation of the Russian Federation and the like. From the same factors, how much Russia is becoming more active in order to try to force Ukraine to sign the corresponding terms of the ceasefire that are unfavorable for Ukraine. How much the situation with air attacks on critical infrastructure facilities will become more active. From many factors, Fedyenko noted and added that it is practically impossible to say now how many months we are talking about.